It is Tuesday, February 11th. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick in for Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. We've all had bosses we wished we didn't have. Why is that? Are they just difficult people, or is it just part of being in charge? Today we're talking about leadership and leaders. How do we find the good ones? Today, I'm joined in the studio by a couple of people who have spent a lot of time thinking about leadership and some of the questions that surround it. Karina Walsh, certified executive leadership coach, and she believes that anyone can learn to be a better leader. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And Beth Saunders, a marketing and analytics professional who has worked with tech startups in this province and is currently working remotely for a company in Silicon Valley. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So before we go any further, just want to mention to all of you listening, if you have questions or you want to join today's conversation, whole variety of ways you can call. So if you have a pen or a pencil handy, first of all, you can text us 709-327-8206, and we'll be monitoring for texts during the show. You can send an email to thesignal@cbc.ca. You can leave a voicemail at 709-576-5260. And of course, as always, we have a couple of numbers where you can reach us in studio if you'd like to appear on the program with us today. You can call us at 709-722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. So, leadership. It comes in many forms, and leaders aren't always necessarily the people we think of, the premiers and prime ministers and executive directors. Karina, you're the author of a book called Modern Manager, Conquering the 5 Frustrations of Leadership.
That's right.
Right in that title is an acknowledgement of how challenging it is to be a good leader. But tell us a little bit about how the book came together and why you thought, okay, I think I've got some arguments to make here, and I better get them down on paper.
Absolutely. So I've been coaching and training managers now for 10 years in my own business, and I've been collecting a lot of data points along the way. Every single manager or executive who comes through my programs, I ask them, what are your biggest challenges right now? And it became so obvious that most managers, whether they are a first-time leader or an experienced leader, are experiencing the same core challenges in trying to get the best performance possible from their team. And so I developed my program specifically to address those challenges. I didn't really plan on writing a book, but, a couple of years ago, the inspiration just came to me, like, how can I help as many managers as possible? There's only so many people I can serve through my business, but by writing a book, I can have a much larger reach. And managers are very stressed out right now. For the first time ever, managers are reporting higher levels of stress than their employees. And so putting those solutions in a book and outlining why it's so hard to lead a team today seemed like to be the best approach, so I could help as many managers as possible.
Okay, I feel for the managers who are stressed out today, but in writing this book and in helping managers figure out how they can get past some of these frustrations, like you say, get a better performance out of their team, is it also a pathway that leads to more satisfied and happy employees?
Absolutely. And that should always be the end goal. If you are fortunate enough to be in a leadership role, you have to take care of the people in your care. So yes, absolutely. The biggest driver of employee engagement is an employee's relationship with their manager. And we've all heard the expression that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. That's not 100% accurate, but in a lot of cases, your relationship with your manager is going to have the biggest impact on your experience at work. You want to make sure you have a good relationship, but at the same time, companies can make sure that they give their managers the tools that they need to lead and engage so they can have good relationships with their employees.
If we zoom out to the big picture, the very big picture, some of the biggest leaders in the world right now are getting mixed reviews at best. Thinking of the new president of the United States and his right-hand man, Elon. But all around the world, you'll find political leaders on all sides of the political spectrum, really, who are deeply unpopular and often make decisions that look really bad. Do you think in this world right now we're in a bit of a leadership crisis?
I think that we're still being kind of seduced by the old-fashioned definition of leadership, the extroverted, the loudest person in the room, the bombastic, the heavy-handed leader. Unfortunately, that person is typically the loudest voice in the room, and unfortunately, the loudest voice in the room tends to win. And what we know in workplaces is that it is completely different. Employees do not want to work for that leader, and they will likely leave if they have to work for that leader. It will cause them great stress. So that's, again, another reason I had to get this message out there that, yes, in the political landscape, in this theatrical, political environment that's happening, that might be the person who gets the votes because they're the loudest voice. But in your workplace, that is not what's going to get results. That is not the type of leader that an employee wants to work for.
Okay. Beth Saunders, hi.
Hello.
You don't come here as someone who is like running their own company or has risen to a high-level leadership management position in a big corporation. You come here as someone who's worked for a variety of startups, and then from time to time you found yourself in a position of supervising or working with people, the kind of job that calls on leadership skills?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so over the years, I've been a manager both for full-time employees as well as work-term students. I've worked remotely for most of my career, actually, for overseeing employees. Kind of early on when I was managing work-term students, it was generally in office, working with them directly. But honestly, since I've been a manager for full-time employees, it's really been since COVID. So it's been an interesting experience kind of learning how to take on that role from a remote perspective. But it's also kind of helped me ease into the process. So yeah, it's been an interesting challenge, but also I've really enjoyed that.
And I know from the notes I have here that you've actually done leadership training with Karina, who's sitting here with us in the studio. Going into that, was there a notion that, okay, if I'm going to be a supervisor of some sort here, I'm not quite sure how to go about it, how to put whatever skills I have into play. What were your thoughts when you sought out that sort of training?
Yeah, so I was actually very fortunate that my organization had a relationship with Karina. And at the time, I was moved into a new leadership position. And the organization actually willingly was like, hey, we have new managers here. And we know that not all of them actually have the training and responsibility to do this role. So they elected to enroll, I think there was like maybe 8 of us at the time. And there had been other cohorts of leaders at the organization. And so we all enrolled together, which was actually a fantastic opportunity. Having everybody in the organization who was going through that together really strengthened the relationships and also just the knowledge sharing across the organization. Everyone could kind of share their experiences. We could work through challenges together, and really we were all on the same page. And so it wasn't just kind of one of us kind of doing the training and really trying to make a difference in the organization and kind of shouting from the rooftops like, hey, we need to make all these changes. Everyone was really bought in, and it really came from the top. So, I think that was super beneficial to have everyone kind of along for the ride.
So Karina, was Beth a good student?
She was my best student.
Well, that's why I'm here.
The comment on the back cover of my book, Best Manager Ever, Beth has received that feedback. I won't be taking any credit for that she got that feedback. But yes, Beth is the classic example of a modern manager. She has the technical aptitude. I'm just going to be her hype girl for a minute there. She has the technical aptitude, of course, to do her job, but she has the empathy. She's tuned into the needs of her people. She's the kind of manager an employee is going to want to work for today. She's going to take care of anyone who reports to her. So yes, I would say that Beth took all the instruction she received and applied it when she got back to work. That's the thing. Getting leadership development is really important. You have to take the lessons that you've learned, the tools and the skills, and you have to apply it when you get back to work.
So, Beth, tell me a little bit. I don't know how long ago you did that training, but can you sort of outline the difference between day one and the final day? What did you learn along the way, and what were some of the real practical pieces you're able to put into place?
Yeah, so I took the training a few years ago now, maybe 3 years ago, I think. And yeah, so really starting out, I was scared, honestly, to be a manager. As Karina had mentioned, you often hear about like the big, like boisterous leaders who are like really loud and I speak up and stuff, but I'm often kind of the quiet one in the room until you get to know me and until I kind of like really get ingrained into the organization. And so I found kind of starting out like my opinions of like what a good manager could be maybe were a little skewed. And so starting out, I didn't really know what to expect from the course, but the thing that I really enjoyed about it is the way that the modules were developed. So we focused on a single chapter at a time. We took the morning really to take on the training, and then over the next month, we had the ability to actually implement what we learned through that training. And so we could come back every month, share our experiences, ask questions, ask for advice. And so the thing that I really liked about it, it was very practical. You were given a lot of frameworks and things to really enable you as a manager. It wasn't just sort of like high-level theory. It was very much like, okay, here's why we're doing this, but here's how you can actually apply that in your day-to-day job. And so one of the things that has continued to stick with me was around like giving feedback in difficult conversations. So one of the frameworks was SBIY. And so it was really explaining when you're giving feedback to somebody, like the situation that is there, the behavior, and what impact that actually had when they were like going through that process. And so I found that having those frameworks made it a lot easier to have conversations with people because there was a structure to it. It wasn't like you were just like, okay, you did something bad and like, I'm going to reprimand you for it. It was very much like trying to get on the individual's level, understand why maybe that was a situation, and then really explaining the impact of that and like why it was maybe something that wasn't wasn't a great thing.
Okay, that's a good concrete example. So it's SBIY.
That's
You go in for a difficult conversation with someone. They might not like what they're about to hear, but first thing you do is you identify the situation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I always want to give my clients the frameworks that they need to be able to communicate. The worst time to have to think about what you want to say in a difficult conversation is when you're in that conversation. So having these frameworks helps managers prepare for those feedback conversations. No one can improve their performance without feedback. Good employees want quality, constructive feedback. And so you start off that conversation by saying, here's the situation as I observed it, without judgment, without blame. We never start off a difficult conversation or a feedback conversation with blame. We don't start off with, you did this. We start off with, you know what, this is what I saw. This is what I'm concerned about. This is the area that I'm worried about. Is it customer service? Is it sales? Something like that. And then you tell them why you're giving them this feedback. I'm giving you this feedback because I know your job is important to you and I know you don't want to make this mistake again. And that's how you lead with inspiration. That's how you inspire a higher level of performance from someone. You're not reprimanding them. You're not heavy-handed. You're not blaming them. We all make mistakes. You were letting them know that this situation didn't really work out. It didn't really go as planned. But you're curious. You're here to find out what was going on with them in that moment. And you're going to invite them into that conversation. Say, tell me what was going on for you in that moment. Why did it go down like that? And then you're going to let them know why you're giving them that feedback. And when you use a framework like that, it increases the chances that the employee is going to understand that you're not picking on them. You're trying to help them perform better. Because what if you don't give them feedback? So a lot of managers avoid giving constructive feedback. But what if you don't give them that feedback? The mistakes continue. And then what if they go on to another role and they're still taking all those mistakes or bad behavior with them? How do you look as their previous leader? So it's about the employee, it's about setting them up for success, and it's about you owning your role as a leader as well.
Has anyone ever suggested that you missed your calling and should have been a therapist working with families and couples
Do you
and
know,
relationships?
I am a certified coach, which is not the same as therapy. However, a lot of the tools I use are simply just really good communication tools. And in my difficult conversations workshop, which is my most popular workshop, by the way, most people in the workshop tell me, I need this for my teenage daughter. I need this to communicate with my teenage son. The tools are the same. It's just the context is slightly different, whether or not you're talking to an underperforming employee or you're talking to a hormonal teenager at home.
Beth, you're currently working for a tech company that's based in Silicon Valley, right?
That's right. Yep.
And living here, working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by now, Silicon Valley, I think that the culture of it is well known enough that it has its stereotypes. And I think we often associate that leadership style for tech startups in particular as one person totally devoted to a vision that they will do anything to see through. We hear the phrase, by now it's a cliche, this move fast and break things and worry about the consequences later, just get the work done. And it doesn't always end up sounding like the kind of person you want to work for. Are you working under someone like that right now?
No, I'm not actually. My manager is very much not like that. I would say, she's very fast paced, likes to experiment with things, but honestly is like the best manager I could honestly ask for. She's empathetic. She's very understanding. She challenges me in all of the right ways. We are both very not open to, but just wanting constructive feedback. And so, I consider myself a high performer, but she's not just somebody who's like giving me the positive reinforcement all the time. Like, yes, she is giving me those things and I really appreciate and want those things. But at the same time, it's noticing things that could make me better. I eat that up. I love hearing those kinds of things. It's always kind of a constant improvement. But even from leadership down, we have a really strong CEO and sure, he's got a vision. But I would not say that he's the kind of person who's just like, rah, rah, this is our vision. Everybody subscribe to this. We've changed direction based on feedback from customers and employees and things like that. And I think, yeah, sure, we're working really hard and driving things forward, but honestly, the culture there has been great. For so far, yeah. You
don't have to give up your weekends for team building exercises or...
No, and I will say I do tend to work more hours than maybe are expected of me, but that's honestly because I'm passionate about what I do, and I really just want to do a good job, and I really enjoy the work that I do.
But it's a high risk and sometimes high stress environment, right?
It is, yeah.
So you have to... Everybody has to be able to do their best under circumstances that aren't always the best.
Right.
And I guess maybe that's where some of these leadership skills really show themselves?
Exactly. Like, if there's things that are happening, like actually today we have a product launch and I'm here now, and my manager honestly was encouraging me to do this radio show. She saw the opportunity, thought it was great, really tries to push me to do these kinds of things. I think it's really, like Karina had said, it's really having empathy for who you're working with, understanding what opportunities really are going to be beneficial for them, and not just thinking about at the end of the day, like, okay, as the company, we need to do this, this, and this, and like you have to meet these goals. It's really, what's going to be best for the employee while also hitting our targets, but really trying to understand where they're coming from.
Karina, you must encounter this question from time to time in the workshops and the coaching that you do, is someone will put their hand up and say, I love these ideas. This is great. Our workday is crazy. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough time. I don't have time to be sitting people down and helping them along. I don't have time to be having the carefully planned out conversation. We got to get stuff done. So what's your response to that in terms of the tools that you provide people with of how they can use it in circumstances that are far from perfect?
That's exactly the comment I hear. We don't have time. I don't have time to come to your leadership development. My response is you don't have time not to come. Because if you think you're busy, you're probably having to repeat yourself. You're probably having to go back and fix a lot of mistakes because you don't have the right tools. So as an example, In the company that Beth was working for, back when she did my program, we did the difficult conversations module. It keeps coming back to difficult conversations. And one of the managers at the end of the module, he was just like, if I had this module last month, it would have saved me a week and a half. It would have saved me a week and a half. And the way I've designed my leadership development is that it's short, digestible modules that you can take back to work immediately so that you can improve communication, which will improve productivity. You will get your time back. If you implement one thing from every module in my program, you're going to gain back at least a week of your time. And so how would it feel to not have to repeat yourself? How would it feel to delegate and not have to take back the work and fix it yourself because you didn't communicate effectively enough the first time? How would it feel not to lose sleep because you have to get up tomorrow morning and go have a constructive feedback conversation with an employee? I would say that you don't have time not to come.
Is it a matter of putting those foundational good practices in place when times are good so that everything can function a little bit better on days when everything's blowing up?
That's exactly it. I always tell companies, like, you need to build that foundation when the time is good. So, when is the best time to hire a leadership coach? When you don't need one. Most people reach out to me when they're starting to have a lot of problems, and we have to spend our coaching time going back and trying to fix the problems that they have. So we're in survival mode. We're just trying to help someone survive some sort of leadership crisis that they're going through, and I want to help you thrive. So only when you have that foundation in place can you start to thrive. It's like the old advice, like, when should you apply for a loan? When you don't need one. Same thing. When should you do leadership development? When you think you don't need it, everything is going well. Invest your time and energy into getting the tools that you need.
Beth, do you find you can use leadership skills to manage up, shall we say? That if you have some of those skills in place, it makes it easier for you to form a relationship with your own supervisor as well as with people who might be working under you?
Absolutely. A good example would be when you're kind of working together with your manager, like, you shouldn't just be an order taker and just kind of doing the things that they say. I feel like it's much more of a collaborative relationship, and that, they should be seeking your advice on things that they could be doing as well. So, having the courage to disagree with your manager or to really say, like, hey, no, this is what I think we should be doing, and kind of pushing ideas forward. I think, there's tons of opportunities there to really move your projects forward and really to be heard as an employee.
You mentioned that you're one of those employees, and there are lots of them out there who are very passionate about their work. You take a lot of satisfaction from it, and it is part of what I guess you would define as your quality of life, is being in a situation where you can do the best work possible. Does it leave you open for exploitation?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I've had to learn over the years, and I'm still learning, honestly, to set boundaries, to say no, to not take on too much. It's a constant struggle, but, I think that's where having the good relationship with your manager really lies, because, you might be in a situation where you've taken on too much work and you really have to have a conversation with your manager, like, hey, look, like, I'm overburdened right now, and I have too many things happening. Like, how can we work together? And, my manager and I have a really great relationship where, she delegates things to me, but she's always like, if you need help with anything, like, let me know, I can jump in. And I think it's really like having that collaborative back and forth relationship that I think is really beneficial.
Karina, does this come up in some of the work and the coaching that you do, that I hope you're going to agree with me when I say this, that having the most productive team that you can have is not simply a matter of squeezing the orange as hard as you can to get every single drop every day?
Absolutely. I mean, we know that rest and time, quality time outside of work, is what replenishes us. You only have so much to give. Once your bucket is empty, and you need to start refilling that bucket before it gets empty so it doesn't go on empty, right? You can use the analogy of your car. You have to put fuel in your car to make it go. Same thing with human beings. We have to have downtime. If you overwork your people, you will come to regret that because they will burn out. The classic example is the overworked high performer. You've got that one high performer on your team and they take on the brunt of the work. Eventually, they're going to get resentful and probably leave. And now you've really shot yourself in the foot because you've just lost probably what was your best performer on the team. And now you have to try and get someone to fill that role. So absolutely, overworking your employees, very bad idea.
Is leadership something that some people are just naturally suited to, the more charismatic types, or do you feel that with the proper approach and diligent work that anybody can be a good supervisor?
I absolutely believe if you want to be a good leader and a good supervisor, you absolutely can be. If you don't want to, if you don't care about people, and I have had people sit across a table from me, and when they ask me what I do for a living, they'll complain about their employees. They'll say, I don't care about people. I don't want to do this. I don't care about what your disc profile was or your personality type. That person should not be in a leadership role. I cannot make you want to do that if inherently you don't want to. But yes, if you have an interest and you want to be a good leader, I can give you the skills and tools. I can show you the way. Absolutely. And the charisma thing, I think that's really, we have to be careful with that. That's really kind of that old fashioned, consideration that perhaps, again, it's the outgoing person that might make the good leader. And we know now, we have plenty of examples. I certainly have plenty of examples that it's the leader who is considerate of others who's typically going to make the best supervisor, manager, executive.
Beth, when you were first asked to take on more of a management or leadership role at the company you were working for at the time, was there a little part of you that thought, oh, I'm not sure I'm the type? Because that occurs to a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, I have self-doubts all the time. And, I tend to maybe not give myself as much credit. But, I saw myself as the high performer, the person who's, like, really succeeding in all of the technical aspects of my role. And, I did question whether it would make sense for me to be in that. I assumed that, eventually I would become a manager because that's just kind of what happens as you're growing in organizations and moving up. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely self-doubt there. But, I knew that I could handle it, and I knew that it was something that I would eventually need to take on. So I just saw it as an opportunity to learn and grow. And thankfully, I had the training to also be able to have the resources to help me get there.
Right. Let's bring another voice into this conversation now. Tom Hickey is the CEO of Wedgwood Insurance, and he is on the line this afternoon. Hello.
Hi, nice to be here, Adam.
It's Jamie filling in for Adam today.
Jamie. Okay.
He had to call in. He had to call in and take a day off at the last minute. But
okay.
Thanks nonetheless for talking to us today. What's your take on leadership? If someone says, "Hey, you're a CEO. What's your leadership style?" What are you going to tell them?
I think that a leadership style is a hard thing to define. I think when I just got connected, I just heard Karina mention about charisma and all those kinds of things, and I think that's all the old school of leadership. So I think these days with leadership, that the style has to all to be about how can you help the people you have working on your team be the very best they can be to get the results you want for your clients first and of course, for the company. So, I think there's as many different styles as there are people, because there is no formula that says you have to be a certain kind of person to be a great leader, assuming you're not a manipulative narcissist or something like that. But, most people are good people. So it's a matter of leveraging your own personal strength. So it doesn't really matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or whether you're a number cruncher or a more creative person. It's all about your ability to lead people and get people pulling from the same oar in a direction that helps them be the best they can be. So that's really what, if I had a leadership style, I'd hope it'd live up to that.
How do you go about motivating employees when you think it's needed, or for that matter, managing and motivating employees when you meet unforeseen obstacles or other days when plans are going off the rails, perhaps?
Yeah, so when you make a business plan, about 2 days after you made it, everything has already changed. So it's inevitable that things are going to go off the rails, especially with the pace of change we see today. So I really think that there's probably, and Karina, like, jump in where you want, because we've had discussions about this before, is, the first thing with a leader is being aware of yourself. So, like, what are your tendencies? I remember in the past I used to think I was the calmest person, most laid back guy, and then when I started talking to my team, I find out that I used to fly off the handle all the time, and they will get used to it. So, like, having emotional control and self-awareness is the first thing, because you're not going to get anywhere with people if you're being emotional about and reacting to things. And the second part of it is having clarity. Like, do the people on your team know exactly what it means for them to do their job? So creating really good clarity on, what success looks like, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So if you have like a self-aware leader and a team that has complete clarity in what it is they're supposed to do, everything else starts to fall into place, assuming you've got the systems in place in your office. So it's really simple to say, not quite as easy in practice. To execute that.
Karina, do you agree with what Tom is saying here, that self-awareness is really important, but we can't always take it for granted that we're self-aware? There are some things about ourselves that we might not be familiar with.
100%. I agree with everything Tom is saying. And he's a classic example as well of that modern leader today who understands how to lead. And really what Tom is talking about is emotional intelligence, right? Recognizing how you are showing up and the impact that you are having on others. And when you are in a leadership role, just by the very virtue of your title, how you show up has more impact and has more influence than anyone else who doesn't officially have that title. So yes, you need self-awareness. And to Tom's point, you may not always be perceived as the way you think you are. And the best way to understand that is to try and get feedback from people. And the best leaders who I have had the privilege of working with, they're not afraid to ask the people who reports to them how they're showing up. And they're not afraid of that feedback.
Okay. Tom, I think another thing that comes into management is you're always going to be working with different personalities. No two people at your office or within your workplace are going to be exactly the same. Is that sort of a daily challenge that you have to manage in an ongoing way? It becomes a full-time part of the job?
I think that's part of, it's one of the best parts of the job, and almost one of the most challenging, because life would be really boring if everybody was exactly the same, right? So from a practical level, you're going to have lots of different people on your team. They're going to have their different ages, they have different levels of experience, they've got different personal strengths and weaknesses, like we all do. So to try and treat everybody exactly the same, we might have the same standard for everybody as to where we want to get, but people might get there in different ways. So that's where the self-awareness comes in, because just because I like to achieve things in a certain way doesn't mean that necessarily applies to everybody else. So you've got to be open-minded enough to, take people where they are and look at what their strengths are and what they bring to the team, and the way they're going to get where they need to go may be different from the way you might think. So, I know for me on a daily basis, I see things going the opposite. Geez, it's almost like the Grinch. That's not the way I would do that. But I've got to let that go, because that's why I have good people working with me, so they can do things and accomplish things in the way that's best for them, not just the way that I like it all the time. So obviously there's some things I got to draw the line on. I won't let people make mistakes if I can help them. But by and large, 90% of the time, people have a certain way of doing things, and that's what works for them. And what I'm concerned with mostly is the result, not about how it gets done. So, that's really the old school, write out a procedure manual and everyone has to follow the book exactly the way it's written. That doesn't work for people these days. Why would someone who's 28 years old and, has got a real great grasp maybe of technology and can do things in a certain way different maybe than someone who's already on our team for 25 or 30 years? They're two totally different things. So why would I possibly expect them to do things the same way? So, a great way to stifle people is to, try and turn them into clones of each other. And that's, I don't think anyone would want to work in an environment like that.
Or turn them into clones of yourself. I did it this way back in the 90s.
Exactly.
Okay. Really fascinating to have you join the conversation, Tom. Thanks so much for talking to us today.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Take care.
That is Tom Hickey, CEO of Wedgwood Insurance, called in to talk about leadership with us today and leadership skills, what makes a good leader, how do we find the good ones or perhaps create the good ones. That's our topic of conversation today. If you have any thoughts, you can send an email to thesignal@cbc.ca. You can leave a voicemail at 709-576-5260, or you can text us 709-327-8206. Before we go any further, guys, we decided we would have a little bit of fun with today's show and listen in on a couple of leaders as they are at work. But okay, not real leaders, leaders from the movies. We're going to start with the first clip here. I think we can probably all agree in advance this is a bad example of how to lead your team. The movie is Glengarry Glen Ross from 1992. Alec Baldwin is the hardcore sales guy overseeing his sales team. Let's check out his motivation style.
The good news is you're fired. The bad news is you've got just 1 week to regain your job, starting with tonight. Have I got your attention now? Good. Because we're adding a little something to this month's sales contest. As you all know, first prize is a Cadillac Eldorado. Anybody want to see second prize? Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired. You can't play in the man's game. You can't close them. Then go home and tell your wife your troubles. Because only one thing counts in this life. Get them to sign on the line which is dotted. Always be closing. Always be closing.
Beth, have you ever worked for that guy or maybe someone who wanted to be that guy?
Thankfully, I haven't actually, which is great.
Karina, you brought this up earlier, that there is an old school style of management, and that's almost a parody of it, really. But I guess a lot of us would think of it as a leadership style that's outdated and harsh and not very useful. But is it still relatively common, not hard to find?
I wouldn't say common, thankfully, especially in Canada, but we still see it. As you mentioned earlier, there's a particular leader in the United States. That's exactly their style. Get on board or get out. And it's demotivating. It's demoralizing. And if you have a leader like that in your organization, you won't have many employees for long.
I've been around long enough that I worked for a few people who probably, they weren't that character from Glengarry Glen Ross, but they probably admired the guy, put it that way, who kind of managed, I kind of think of it as they managed as cowboys. None of them are around now, and none of them are people I'm working for currently. I just want to make that clear. But where do you think some of that comes from? Is there kind of, okay, is ego a barrier to good leadership? Because now I'm in the chair, I'm the big shot.
Ego is absolutely a barrier to good leadership. It's not about you. Leadership is not about you. Yes, you do have to have self-awareness. You do have to understand how you're showing up and the impact you're having on others. But the ego-driven leader is all about, the job title, all about the accolades, getting the results at any cost, just like you heard in that clip. Even though it's a parody, it's actually very representative of that old style of leadership, of leading with fear. And if you're ego-driven, if you're letting your ego drive you, you're probably trying to lead everyone else with fear. You're probably trying to be a driver of leadership, which is the opposite of modern day leadership. So you're staying on top of people, you're holding everyone's feet to the fire instead of lighting the fire within them.
Is there room then, shall we say, for tough love?
I'm not a fan of tough love. I believe that you can find a good balance. What I coach and train managers on is finding that balance of empathy with candor. So it's candor plus caring. And even when you're giving that constructive feedback, it's like the reason you're going to tell someone why you're giving them the feedback is to let them know that you care. You care about them. You care about their career. You're going to hold them accountable. We all need to be held accountable. Nothing happens in this world without accountability. But you can do that with a sense of caring. You can put in the effort to learn how to communicate in a way that doesn't tear someone down, but actually lifts them up. It's the same amount of effort. It's the same amount of effort to communicate without care and to really tear people down as it is to put in a little bit of effort to learn how to communicate with empathy.
Beth, we didn't invite you in the studio to bare your soul here and tell us every detail of your life. But can you remember a time perhaps earlier in your career when you had to take a really, really difficult message, take it home, live with it for a while, and resolve how to do better?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know if I ever really got like really harsh feedback. Not to like, puff myself up being like, oh, I'm the perfect employee. But, generally I think it's more, I tend to be more self-critical than others. And when I hear maybe there's something that wasn't necessarily harsh feedback, but maybe I like took it to heart, or I was just like, oh, I could have done better. Like, why did I make this stupid mistake? But there isn't one situation that comes to mind, actually, which I guess is probably a good thing that I'm not really remembering something like that. But yeah, I tend to be my harshest critic.
I think a lot of us are like that. I mean, if I'm hosting radio shows and I have a lousy show, I don't need anyone else to come tell me.
That's right.
Karina, I wonder if there are circumstances where employers or managers or leaders have to work a little harder to work people up. Because if you are self-critical, like Beth, like me, like a lot of people, I guess, you actually can be too hard on yourself, which becomes an obstruction to, getting the job done better the next day.
Mm-hmm. That's a real problem today. A lot of people, especially when you're newer and starting off on your job, every mistake feels like it's some big catastrophe, and it's actually a very small thing. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to a lot of managers who are dealing with that, a younger generation who wants a lot of positive reinforcement, needs a lot of validation and reassurance, and that's fine. Eventually, if you give someone good positive feedback and you give them examples of what they're doing right, hopefully they'll start to build up their own confidence. Have a little bit of patience with someone who's newer in their role or someone who doesn't have a lot of career experience. I wrote a case study about an amazing leader named Brian. If anyone wants that case study, feel free to email me. He had a great technique. Every single time an employee came to him very kind of down, feeling down about a mistake that they made, Brian would always top them. Brian would always point out a mistake that he made that was worse than what they did to try and make them feel better. So he would say something like, oh, you think you made a mistake? Wait until you hear about what I did. And, there's nothing that makes us feel better, I think, and makes us relate to someone than hearing about a mistake that they made. We don't relate to someone who's perfect. We relate to each other's, mistakes and things that we've made. So that was just such a great technique from a modern manager. Is like, I'm going to top your mistake. I'm going to tell you about something I did, and we're going to have a laugh about it, and then we're going to move on.
Also, anyone you work with who won't own up to the fact that at some point they've made egregious mistakes is not being entirely honest with you.
100.
It's universal, right?
Exactly,
We've all done it.
100%.
We're going to go back to the movies for one more clip. This is from a much more recent production. It's The Bear, which is a series that's currently running. And, okay, all you need to know about this clip, doesn't matter if you've seen the show or not. Richie is an underperforming, unmotivated employee at a restaurant. And in the scene we're going to hear, he's been given the task of polishing the forks, a lot of forks, one after the other. He is not doing a great job, so his supervisor calls him out on it.
Do you think this is below you or something?
Man, I think I'm 45 years old polishing forks.
No one is asking you to be here. I don't think anybody remembers your name.
Nice try. You think I don't know how hard it is hiring people since COVID?
We don't have that problem.
You really drink this Kool-Aid, huh?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
Because I love this, Richie. I love this so much, dude. Did you know that when this restaurant opened 12 years ago, it won the best restaurant in the world the same year? It's retained 3 stars because we have a waiting list that's long. 5,000 people waiting at any given moment long. It takes 200 people to keep this place in orbit, and at any given moment, one of those people that is waiting in line gets to eat here. They get to spend their time and their money here. I'm sorry, bro, but we need to have some forks without streaks in them. You don't have to drink the Kool-Aid, Richie. I just need you to respect me. I need you to respect the staff, I need you to respect the diners, and I need you to respect yourself.
I can do respect.
So again, that's a clip from The Bear, a series currently running on television, currently streaming. Beth, you mentioned how passionate you are about your job. Do we have to accept the fact that some days you just had to go in and it's going to be polishing forks?
Yeah, I mean, there's always like low level, satisfying tasks that you're going to have to do. I think that comes with any job. And, you know, you take the good with the bad. Like, presumably you're in an organization where there's many more good days than there are bad days or more tasks that you're passionate about. But I think it just comes with the nature of work. Like, you're not going to love every moment and every task you have to do. And I think as long as overall you're passionate about what you're doing and you're getting satisfaction, then those things are fine to do every now and again, as long as it's not your entire focus.
Karina, again, we just heard a clip from a TV show, and their job is to make the story as dramatic as possible. So, but in the real world, are there times when someone needs a good, solid talking to about respecting the workplace, respecting themselves?
Absolutely. Candor plus caring. You need to be very direct sometimes because that's the only thing people are going to hear. But again, that doesn't mean you can just drop your empathy and use that as an excuse to tear someone apart. But, you know, I have plenty of examples in my book like this. I even use The Bear, that very episode, as an example. But I have an example in my book about a HR manager who could not motivate an employee. And finally, she sat him down and she said, "Do you even want to be here?" And he finally confessed, "No, this is not what I want to do with my life. I was pressured into this career path by my parents." So yes, sometimes a little bit of candor and a direct conversation is required. Lay the expectations out on the line for someone. But again, there's a way to do that with a certain level of respect and empathy. You have to respect everyone, and especially if you expect to get that respect in return.
What can a manager reasonably expect? I think if using the example that you just gave us, if the supervisor or the leader of the organization sits down with someone and says, "Do you really want to be here?" I mean, is it fair for the employee to say, "Well, primarily I'm here for the money. It's an okay job, but I'm here because I want to make a living and I have a lot of other things going on in my life. I'm willing to do my best while I'm here."
Right. And that's what we hope for. You know, we all have other things going on in our lives, but while we're here doing this job, we have to give at least 100%. If you applied for a job and if you accepted that role, there's an understanding from the manager or the person who hired you that you're going to come in and do your best every day. I'm not expecting you to do backflips, you know, around the office and, completely stress yourself or kill yourself trying to do everything. But you have to at least give it your best shot. And when it's required, go above and beyond if that's within your resources to do that. But again, if you applied for a job and you accepted the role, take responsibility for your own performance. Absolutely.
Beth, working in the tech industry, you've worked for several companies now, would we say?
I have,
at this point?
Yep.
And you're still relatively early in your career, I would say. Within that industry, is it understood by managers and leaders that some people are going to stop for a while and then move on?
I mean, yeah, especially like working in tech, there's a lot of people who will, you know, push themselves, go really quick, like, you know, burn themselves out and kind of move on. But I think also the goal is to try to get the most out of people and really to engage them to be longer term employees. But yeah, I think, it's just the nature of the job, especially as you grow and scale and there's more employees there, like people are going to come and go and move on to new opportunities, especially if, you know, you're hiring like really top performers who, you know, are probably going to get snatched up for other opportunities. So, yeah, it definitely happens.
And Karina, do managers have to expect and accept that sometimes in some positions, the people you're going to get are primarily seeing it as a stepping stone?
I mean, yes, I think that's perfectly realistic. People are very mobile, especially with now that we have these remote job opportunities. People are going to look for remote jobs first. Absolutely, it's expected that an employee is going to move on. And some people outgrow their role. If you're a high performer like Beth and you've gotten everything you can out of your role, why wouldn't you move on? And a modern manager would never hold an employee back. And the best, most inspiring leaders I've encountered, not only do they support their employee to move on, they help them find their next role. Jennifer Gillivan is an amazing leader. She's one of the most admired leaders in Canada. She wrote the foreword for my book. When someone has outworked their role in her organization, she will help them find their next role. That is an outstanding leader today.
We have a message that came in from a listener, Sean, who runs his own company, and here's what he said in his email. A true leader should be visible during every task, from the most basic to the most crucial decisions all the way up. When leaders are willing to work at every level, even the most humble ones, they get their hands dirty. That's how they earn genuine respect.
Yeah.
So visibility, do you agree with Sean that it's an important aspect of the job?
I do, absolutely. I think if I'm interpreting his comment correctly, what he's saying is you should never be too good to go, even if you own the company or if you're the CEO, never be too good to go back and do something on the front line and jump in if you're an employee needs some help or support, if I'm interpreting that right. So yes, absolutely. I think visibility is important. I think if you're running a very large organization where you've got like 5,000 employees, I think that could be a challenge. But if you're a small business owner, absolutely being there to support your frontline employees and never being afraid to jump back in to do the work that you once did, I think that's crucial.
And if you are working for a much, much larger organization, you're right. It is harder for someone who's at the top to have a personal touch. I think many of us in many workplaces are familiar with the sort of Friday walk around that the managers occasionally do to make small talk with people. I don't know if they're useful or not. But do you talk to people about leadership styles that are useful when you can't be hands-on and when you can't sit down and look someone in the eye?
I have absolutely helped executives achieve that engagement. It's harder, but it's not impossible. So, for instance, an amazing leader I once worked for early in my career, we were in a large organization, at least, 1,000 employees. There's just no way she was getting out to go down and talk to frontline employees. But she sent out a video every Friday, just a very informal video, letting everyone know the updates for the organization, letting everyone know. She would do a little shout out, perhaps, if it was somebody's birthday or someone celebrated a milestone. It's harder when it's a large organization, but it's not impossible. You just have to get a little more creative.
Yes, Beth, go ahead.
I want to give a shout out to the CMO of my company. She's fantastic at posting a Monday update. And as part of that, she calls out specifically people from the marketing team and wants to acknowledge their work regardless of where you sit in the company. And I think that's fantastic. And again, she'll do some videos so you get kind of that personal touch. And I think it goes a long way. And we also do as well quarterly awards for folks on the marketing team. And that I think is really huge as well. It just gives people the recognition no matter where you sit in the company. And even, if you were just starting out there a few months in, you might get a shout out, and it feels really good when that happens.
Yeah.
This hour has flown by and it's almost at a conclusion. And I don't want to let the rest of it fly by without Karina doing the little giveaway. Yeah. You have a copy of your book. First of all, tell us the title.
My book is called Modern Manager, Conquering the 5 Frustrations of Leadership. So I explain why being a leader today can be so challenging. I explain the top 5 challenges that most managers, especially new managers, are going to face. And obviously, I give you the tools and frameworks you're going to need to overcome those challenges. I'm excited to give away a signed copy. I've thrown in one of my signature leadership mugs to give you a little bit of inspiration as you sip your morning coffee every day. So I'm looking forward to being able to, give someone a treat today with that giveaway.
All right. And the way to enter for that contest to win the book and the mug, I think we'll give them away together as a package deal to one lucky listener. Email thesignal@cbc.ca or call and leave us a message, 709-576-5260. Make sure you leave your name, how we can get in touch with you, and where you're calling from. And we'll one lucky listener will walk away with Karina's book and with the leadership mug as well. Karina Walsh, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Beth Saunders, it's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thanks so much. It was great.
It's a fascinating topic. I think we could do a couple of shows on this one. That is it for today's edition of The Signal. Please remember that you can find and share all episodes of the show on the CBC Listen app. They are stored there. And also on our YouTube channel at CBC Newfoundland and Labrador. You can review anything that you heard today or perhaps catch up on the show if you tuned in late, or you can recommend it to a friend. If you have any thoughts about today's topic, you can leave an email at thesignal@cbc.ca or a voicemail at 709-576-5260. That's also how you can get in touch with us if you'd like to win a copy of the book by Karina Walsh that she's left us very generously today for a giveaway, as well as her inspiring leadership mug. Coming up tomorrow on the show, food banks and shelters. How are they faring in these coldest months of winter? We'll be checking in with several food bank and shelter operators on that. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick, sitting in for Adam Walsh. Thanks so much for joining us today on The Signal. Have a great afternoon.